Mr. Bailiff, if you'll show the jury in, please.
All right. All jurors present.
There you go. Be seated, please. Would the state call its next witness, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Next witness is Kristen Cullen.
Good morning. Would you raise your right hand and be sworn in by the clerk, please?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you will give will be the truth and the whole truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please have a seat and kind of adjust the microphone so you can speak into it. And then I'm going to ask you to state your name and then spell your name for the court reporter.
Of course. My name is Kristen Cullen, Kristincullen.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may do so.
Thank you. Ms. Cullen, in July 19th of 2023, what job did you have at that point?
I was a medical legal death investigator with the 8th Judicial Circuit,
And
the
what
Medical
exactly?
Examiner's Office.
I'm sorry. Thank you. What exactly is that?
So, medical legal death investigation is under the Medical Examiner's Office. We're tasked with recording the events surrounding and leading up to a death for individuals that fall or may fall under the jurisdiction of the medical examiner, so unattended, unplanned deaths.
Can you tell the jury your educational experience?
Of course. I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Florida, and I majored in forensic anthropology and entomology, so bugs and bones.
And can you tell the jury your work experience?
Of course. I started with the medical examiner's office in 2007 as an unpaid internship, and then in 2008 I started doing autopsy, and I moved into investigations in 2011 and stayed there until August of this year.
Roughly, Ms. Cullen, how many autopsies have you been involved in your career working with the medical examiner's office? I know that was for quite a while, but just roughly.
Hundreds? I don't have a count because
Okay. But it would be in the
it's a lot.
hundreds.
Yeah, it's a wide area.
Okay.
Hundreds or thousands.
Okay. Let me take you to specifically July 19th of 2023.
Yes,
Did you receive a call from the Baker County Sheriff's Office?
I did.
And who did you receive a call from?
I don't have my ROI in front of me. It was a detective who was recorded in my ROI. I apologize.
Was it Detective Dougherty?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you do once you received that call?
I logged the basic information into our computer to generate a case number, and I proceeded to Ed Frazier Memorial Hospital.
And did you meet with Detective Dougherty when you got to the hospital?
I did.
Can you describe to the jury what you saw when you got to the hospital?
So in the exam room, it was the first exam room, was the decedent who was on a hospital bed. She was covered, and I proceeded to take photos and record what I was seeing, where she was, and to also speak with the detective.
What would you say was your initial synopsis when you first arrived?
In terms of the decedent's appearance?
Yes.
Okay. She didn't have any trauma. There were no bruises, even those kind of typical for an older baby. There was no obvious injuries, and she had livor mortis, which is the shifting of the blood after death. The blood pools where somebody lays because it's not flowing through the body. And she did not have rigor mortis, which is the stiffening of the muscle fibers. So that was not present. So that told me this is pretty recent. And she was very warm, very hot to the touch, which is incredibly unusual.
Can you explain to the jury what is mottled liver mortis?
Of course. So the mottled appearance, a better word might be splotchy. It's not really a fixed border, and that's reasonable because the child had been moved by EMS and, hospital workers trying to save her life. So that appearance is expected.
And where did you observe mottled liver mortis, specifically on the child's body?
So specifically, I apologize, I don't have my report in front of me.
That's okay.
Because I had it electronically and we were told not to put those there. So around the borders where, so for instance, if somebody died sitting, I'm sitting, you might find the pooling in a downward position, maybe in my legs. So towards the top of where those pooling areas would be pretty well defined. You'd have a border of pink versus white, in her case because she's of lighter skin, where you would see the settling. So in those splotchy areas, it would be a little bit more patterned, more dappled or splotchy or mottled. Does that make sense? And those were consistent with her having been seated. So she was told to me to have been in a baby seat. And then where those were kind of shifting is consistent with somebody had moved her within X amount of time.
So what you observed was consistent with the child being, would you say, slightly reclined in a seated position, like from the car seat?
Yes.
And you said that the child felt unusually hot to the touch.
She was very hot to the touch, which is very unusual because a small child's body cools quickly. And very often they're not warm at all. They're more cool or even cold by the time we come onto scene, sometimes an hour or so later. So for this child to be physically hot to the touch was very unusual.
What did you do next, Miss Colon?
So I removed her, she was covered by a sheet, which is standard in her hospital bed, and I removed that. I photographed her in place, and then I photographed her on her front and her back, and I moved her clothing as was reasonable to look for any other, to see where the pattern continued. I did not remove her clothing, but just where it was in situ to see if there were any obvious injuries and to look for that livor mortis pattern to see if it was consistent and record it for the doctor.
What did you do next, Miss Colon?
So when I was done recording and speaking with the detective and the hospital staff, I took my findings and left to go back to the medical examiner's office to write everything up. I did not take the decedent's body with me. I was told that the family wanted to say goodbye so that there were additional procedures.
And so the body would have been transported later?
Yes, normally we do take it, but sometimes these things happen and it's very reasonable.
Did you have any other involvement in this case?
No.
Your Honor, I think that's all I have. I tender the witness if the defense has questions.
Cross?
Does have no questions.
Okay. Can this witness be excused?
Yes, she can be excused.
Very well. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Would the state call its next witness, please?
Thomas Coyne.
All right, sir, if you will please raise your right hand and be sworn by the clerk.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you will give will be the truth and the whole truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. If you'll have a seat and then adjust the microphone so you can speak into it, and then I will ask you to please state your name and then spell your name.
Sure. Thomas Coyne, C-O-Y-N-E. Thank you.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Coyne, what is your occupation?
Sure. I'm the current Chief Medical Examiner for the District 2 Medical Examiner's Office based in Tallahassee.
Dr. Coyne, can you tell the jury what is your educational background?
Sure. Undergraduate degree from Rutgers University, followed by an MD from Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, which is also Rutgers University. And at the same time, I completed a PhD in toxicology and pharmacology from Rutgers University. After that, I completed a residency training in pathology or general pathology known as anatomic pathology at the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. At that same time, I completed subspecialty training in neuropathology. And then I went to Miami, the Miami-Dade Medical Examiner's Office, where I completed a year in forensic pathology training. So currently, right now, I'm board certified in anatomic pathology, neuropathology, and forensic pathology.
And can you also tell the jury your work experience?
Sure. So after Miami, I worked for approximately 8 years in Fort Myers, Florida, at the District 21 Medical Examiner's Office. I started out as the Associate Medical Examiner and moved up to the Deputy Chief. After that, I came to Gainesville, where I worked as the Chief Medical Examiner for District 8 for approximately 18 months, and then took over as the Chief Medical Examiner in Tallahassee now, almost 3 months now.
Doctor, what is pathology?
Sure. Pathology is an area of medicine, much like general medicine. We sort of work behind the scenes. A pathologist's job really is to study disease and identify disease in all its forms. And we work in hospital systems and with general practitioners, generally receiving tissues, fluids, or examining the person when they're deceased through autopsy. The goal of which is to identify disease, assist the physician in identifying and following treatment for that disease, or in deceased persons like I work with, trying to identify cause and manner of death.
And doctor, what is the difference between pathology and forensic pathology?
Sure. Pathology, again, is just the general study of disease, and we use a whole host of tools, from molecular genetics, histology, autopsy practice to identify disease. Forensics goes a little further, such that we understand or learn about the mechanisms of how injury occurs. Not just injury or injury in all forms, but also patterns of decomposition, how decomposition occurs, environmental injury, get a little toxicology and poisonings in there as well. And we use that, again, to really come together and figure out why a person dies and then the manner of why a person dies.
So you're board certified in forensic pathology.
Yes, I am.
And what does board certification mean?
The American Board of Pathology has a process by which we undergo certification. So generally, it's an exam that we take after training, and then that's followed up yearly with just maintenance of certification.
Can you tell the jury your duties as the medical examiner?
Sure. As the medical examiner, whether it was in District 8 or District 2, I oversee all of the cases that fall under our jurisdiction for that area. And so my goal is to work with law enforcement or other local hospital physicians to, again, figure out why a person died and arrive at a cause and manner of death. I also oversee the operations of the office, work with our medical death investigators, and again, interact with multiple law enforcement agencies throughout the area.
Doctor, does part of your job include doing autopsies to determine the cause and manner of death?
Yes, it does.
Approximately how many autopsies have you performed or assisted with, would you say?
Approaching around 3,500 now.
Can you explain to the jury what exactly is an autopsy?
Yeah, sure. An autopsy is like examining a live patient in an office. It begins first by looking at the external features of a body. So we look just for normal body features, height, weight, hair color, and then we look to see, is this person congenitally normal? Are there any other disease processes or injuries that may explain why this person is deceased? After we document all of our external findings, we move internal. So we will look at all of the internal body cavities. So the abdominal cavity, the chest cavity, the cranial vault to look at the brain. And again, we will look at all those organs, seeing are they structurally normal? Are there any disease processes or injuries that I may observe? And then putting it all together to arrive at, again, the cause and manner of death.
Doctor, I want to bring you to this case specifically.
Sure.
Did you perform an autopsy on a Uriah Page?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember when and where?
It was at the District 8 Medical Examiner's Office in Gainesville, and I believe it was July 21st, 2023.
And did you determine how old Araya Page was?
Yes, it was. So her age was made available to us through investigation, and she was 10 months old.
And when you did the autopsy on her, just generally, what was the first thing you did, the procedures you would normally go through?
Sure. It began with the external examination and making the determination that this was a congenitally normal 10-month-old female without any observable congenital abnormalities or developmental abnormalities.
So you didn't observe any external abnormalities?
Other than the fact that she had early features of decomposition, and there was some desiccation or drying of the oral cavity that was visible on inspection.
And then did you move to the internal examination?
Yes.
Let me start with the external examination. Can you tell the jury specifically what you did with the external examination regarding Araya Page?
Sure. So it begins by essentially taking photo documenting the body as it's received. So we'll open the body bag. If there are any clothing or medical devices that are present, we will remove them, document them, and then again begin looking literally from head to toe, examining the eyes, the ears, the mouth, the external body features. And again, as I mentioned, the only thing I can report here, normal developmental 10-month-old female. She had drying of the oral cavity, and we were able to see green discoloration of the abdomen, which is a characteristic of early decomposition.
Would you say that upon the external examination that Araya Page presented as a normally developed, well-nourished child?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury what is rigor mortis and what is liver mortis?
Sure. Rigor mortis is just basically after death, the muscles of the body will move into a contracted state. And that's because as we die and blood flow stops, the movement of energy into our muscles ceases. And so therefore, the muscles become contracted. And then that firm contracted state is what we call rigor mortis. Over time, anywhere from 6 to 12 hours, that will break due to the process of decomposition. And so then we will say rigor mortis has passed. Livor mortis refers to the settling of blood within our body after death. And so the heart is no longer pumping, blood will settle based on gravity, and so it will settle into the skin, and you will begin to see discoloration in the skin. Generally, if you were laying on your back, let's say, you would see that discoloration in the back of the head, the back of the legs. That is called livor mortis. That also will become fixed over about 6 to 12 hour period as decomposition sets in. So initially, livor mortis can move. So if a body is found on its back and then it's moved within, let's say, an hour period, flipped overwards, the livor can move based upon gravity. But over the course of, like I said, 6 to 12 hours, it will become fixed.
And did you see signs of livor mortis?
Yes.
And specifically, what was that again, doctor? I'm sorry.
So sure, yeah. So the livor mortis on the decedent here was mostly posterior, fixed as well. So it looked as if she had, for instance, I think the report came to us that she was within a car seat at the time of her death, and her livor mortis pattern was consistent with that.
Did you notice anything unusual about the child's lips?
Again, just the desiccation and also the degree of decomposition, which is a little more advanced than I would have expected for her time of death.
Did you determine a reason for that?
Sure. Again, we're dependent upon the information that's presented us at the time, and so of course I knew that this child had been left within a car seat, in a car, in a vehicle, exposed to sun for an approximate 5-hour period, and so that would be consistent with those findings.
Did you then move, doctor, to doing an internal examination?
I did.
Can you tell the jury what you did with the internal examination and your findings with that?
Sure. So again, as I said before, we examined all of the internal body cavities, all of the organs, and essentially she was a normal developing child, no gross evidence of any congenital abnormalities or any other reason that I would have seen to have led to her death based on working pathology. The only thing I can say that was a little bit out of the ordinary was the fact that her lungs were a little bit full of fluid, or edematous, as we say, and as well.
As part of the autopsy, were toxicology tests done on Araya Page?
Yes.
And what were the results of the toxicology testing?
They were negative for drugs of abuse.
So there was nothing.
That's correct.
So would it be fair to say from your external examination and your internal examination, Araya Page seemed to be a well-nourished child with no abnormalities at all?
That's correct.
Based on your experience and training, do you have an opinion as to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to the cause of death of Araya Page?
Yes, complications of hyperthermia.
And what is hyperthermia?
Hyperthermia refers to all of the pathophysiological processes that occur when our body temperature becomes elevated, or severely elevated in this case.
Is that the same as heat stroke?
Hyperthermia is the overarching term. Heat stroke is a clinical presentation that occurs during that process, and that's sort of the end stage, if you will. If heat stroke isn't attended to, then the person could die or have severe consequences thereof. And so heat stroke, heat exhaustion, those are all clinical presentations of hyperthermia.
But in this case, you determined the cause of death to be hyperthermia.
That's correct.
In your career as a medical examiner, have you dealt with patients who have succumbed to hyperthermia?
Yes, both adult and pediatric.
And pediatric. Roughly, how many pediatric cases have you dealt with?
Over the course of 10 years in Florida, I've had approximately 4 cases I was involved with of children who died due to they're being left within a car on a hot day. I've also had cases of exhaustion, external or environmental hyperthermia in both kids and adults as well.
Can you explain to the jury what type of training and education you have in relation to dealing with hyperthermia and what that is?
Sure. Well, it starts with your medical training. And so, of course, to triage a patient who is hyperthermic, you have to understand all of the underlying processes or pathophysiological processes, if you will, that occur when a person's body is overheated. That goes from febrile illnesses or having a fever to hyperthermia, meaning it's not driven by the hypothalamus. And so yes, so you start in medical school with that, how to recognize it, what you do to treat those patients, and then from a pathology standpoint, you learn about how to identify those changes in tissues or in a deceased person. So from the beginning of my career on to the end of my training, I've had education, if you will, about hyperthermia.
And doctor, can you describe to the jury if an individual has passed away from hyperthermia, what happens to the body?
Sure. Well,
in that instance,
I talked a little bit before about accelerated decomposition, or the fact that in this case I was able to see green discoloration of the abdomen. So when a person dies and they have elevated body temperature, it accelerates the processes of decomposition, especially with hyperthermia, because part of that process, as a person is trying to compensate for the elevated body temperature, the circulation is sort of rerouted, if you will. Blood vessels dilate in the periphery to allow you to get rid of excess heat. Sweating occurs, and that usually comes at the compromise of circulation to our gut. And so even in persons who are living, they tend to have some underlying gut pathology. And that can also allow the bacteria within our gut to get out of our gut and get into our body tissues. And a person who's live could also present to a hospital with sepsis because of that. But for me, looking at a deceased person, when that process begins while the person is live and it continues after death. So therefore, the movement of bacteria out of the gut into your tissues allows for the acceleration of decomposition. That is further accelerated because of the higher body temperatures. And so the bacteria thrive in those environments. And so in this particular case, I was able to see changes to her body that I would have normally not seen had she been maintained at a normal body temperature.
what happens to the body temperature in a situation like this?
And hypothermia, well, especially in a child, it rapidly changes. And so normally, we exist around 98.6, let's say. Kids have a much larger body surface area relative to their mass. And so they have a lot more surface area that can rapidly heat up, especially if they're placed into a very warm environment. A car like that, even on a mild day, anywhere from like 70 degrees to, let's say, 95 plus, can get very warm on the inside in a rapid amount of time, even if the car had prior air conditioning running prior to being turned off. So within a 20 to 30 minute time frame, temperatures can exceed 115 degrees up to even, and studies have shown up to 140 degrees. And so a child in that environment will rapidly begin to have an elevation of heart rate. They will have an elevation of breathing. Their body is trying to get rid of excess heat. And in doing so, it puts an inordinate strain on the heart. It leads to incredible rapid losses of fluid, so they will begin to dehydrate very rapidly. And it leads to derangements in electrolytes. And because blood flow is being rerouted to just support the heart, the brain, the vital organs, other organs like your gut, your kidneys begin to shut down, and you begin to have organ failure. And if that progresses, the heart itself usually stops, or you have a dysrhythmia.
What other type of organ damage would an infant experience who is experiencing hyperthermia?
It will affect almost every organ in the body, from the skin to the gut, but most importantly, the vital organs, the heart and the brain, are compromised. The brain especially, because we have loss of oxygen due to, as the pressures drop, because your body is massively dilating blood vessels to get rid of excessive heat, that leads to decreased perfusion of vital structures in the brain. And a child's brain is different than our brain. It requires more per minute volume of blood flow because their brain is developing. And so there are certain brain regions can become hypoxic, and that could lead to irreversible brain damage, even if you treat this child and you resuscitate them from this presentation. But again, the most vital organs that sustain damage will be the heart and the brain.
Would the brain swell?
Yes.
Body temperature would obviously raise. What would be the temperature that it could go up to?
Sure. Well, the body will move up to whatever temperature is within the car. I mean, so generally death will occur prior to a person going above 10 degrees. Your organs will shut down. But even after a person is deceased, your body temperature will match that of its environment if it's there long enough.
So if the vehicle were 120,
The body would.
the body temperature would go to 120. If it was 130, it would go to 130.
That's correct.
One moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
I think that's all that I have. I tender the witness, Your Honor.
Very well. Cross-examination?
Good morning, Doctor.
All right.
You and I have spoken before.
Yes, we
correct? Okay. I want to ask you a couple of questions about your career up to this point.
Sure.
I think you told us that you went to Rutgers University and then to, I guess, a medical school that was there, correct?
Yes, Robert Wood Johnson.
I missed the date that you graduated, I'm sorry.
I graduated 2009. 2006, my PhD, 2009, my MD.
And did you become certified as a physician in at Rutgers or in Florida?
So 2009, I completed my, actually, it would have been 2009, I completed the first two steps of the US MLE, which is the United States Medical Licensing Exam. 2010, during my first year of residency, I completed the third and final step of the United States Medical Licensing Exam. After completion of my residency in 2014, I then became certified in anatomic pathology and neuropathology. And then following year, I completed my forensic pathology training, and so I became board certified in forensic pathology, and that should have been 2015.
When did you come to Florida?
Came to Florida 2013.
I think you told us you were the assistant ME in Fort Myers, I believe you said?
Yep, started out, I was hired as an associate medical examiner, and then within, I think, 2 years, I became the deputy chief, and I was that up till 2022 when I left. Yep.
So you've been doing autopsies or in this field of pathology since about 2013?
Autopsy since 2009 when I started residency. Yep.
Doctor, you mentioned something about being board certified, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have what's called a CV? Do you know what that is?
Yes,
Do you have one?
I do, yes.
Okay. In that CV, do you list this educational background that you have?
Yes, yeah.
Do you also list any articles you may have written on
Yes.
this subject? How many do you think you've written?
Abstracts, I've published probably 25, and articles is probably close to, I'd say 15 to 20, I presume. Yeah.
How many?
Probably 15 to 20, I presume.
15 to 20?
In that
Okay.
range, yeah.
These are articles that are published in some type of medical journal?
Yeah, yes.
Do you recall what journals those were?
They vary. They're pathology journals, neuroscience journals. I even have a journal of veterinary medicine as well.
In veterinary medicine, you said?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Is that standard for individuals in your field to do that?
Yes, more so, I'd say, for those of us who have that PhD background, because we sort of come out of a research area. But yes, it's very common for doctors to publish.
Are your articles ever cited by other doctors?
Yeah, I believe they are, yeah.
Is that a common practice as
Yes.
well in your
Yeah,
field?
yes, it is, yeah.
Right. So things like writing articles and having your articles referenced or cited are things that are common in the field of your
Yes.
field and generally in science in general, correct?
Yeah, that's how we progress medicine, yep.
How you progress medicine. In other fields as well in science, correct?
That's correct.
Doctor, in this particular case, I don't know if you gave us the date. What date was the autopsy done?
July 21st,
And the child died on July 19th?
July 19th, yeah.
Okay. Would you agree with me that when you examined Araya Page, he had no signs of any injuries?
Correct.
No, what I would call trauma. Is that correct?
Correct.
Define that for the jury. What's trauma mean?
Yeah, sure. Trauma, we tend to break it down into blunt trauma versus sharp trauma. And our blunt trauma encompasses all injuries like abrasions or, say, bruises or contusions where a force was applied to the body or body tissues. That also includes fractures. It includes hemorrhage within body temperatures, like, tissues, whether it be a bruise in the arm or even a hemorrhage within an organ. Sharp injuries include, cutting, cuts from sharp injuries. Lacerations tend to fall under the blunt category as tearing of tissues. Those are all the types of injuries we would describe.
And I think the state asked you how many times you may have examined children, done autopsies on children, correct?
Yes. Of my, probably well over 500. I mean, I started out training at the Penn and the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, so I had a lot of exposure of infant autopsies in the early part of my career, and that's continued. I'd say probably what we see as medical examiners, maybe 10% of our cases are pediatric cases.
10%?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I wrote down that you said that you believe you've done 4 autopsies of children that were left in a hot car.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Now, when you say that, you mean in the district that you were in at the time, correct?
Yes, so that's from my time in Miami through Fort Myers and, of course, Gainesville.
And how many medical districts are there in the state of Florida?
There are 25.
So you've worked in 3 of them,
Yes.
and you've seen 4 hot cars?
Well, I've worked in more than just 3. You know,
Okay.
we kind of move around a little bit, but yes.
Okay. Are you aware that there's more than that in the state of Florida?
Yes.
Is it a common thing, would you say?
For children left in hot, not common, but I know it does occur every year. Yeah.
I want to ask you about something you said toward the end of your testimony. I wrote this down, and if I have it wrong, you correct me, okay? You said, even on a mild day, and I think you gave temperatures between maybe 75 and 90 something, I don't recall exactly what you said.
Yeah, so there has been a number of studies that have been performed. I think of the largest one out in San Francisco, looking at the differences in internal car temperatures on cars left within or in exposure to full sun, and temperatures ranging from like 72 degrees up through, I think, 96. And it didn't really have a difference with regards to how rapid temperature can increase within a car. And even in mild temperatures, you could still achieve very high internal temperatures.
Okay. So just to make sure I'm clear, you said there was studies that have been done
That's correct.
that even on days when the outside temperature is somewhere between 72 and 96,
Yeah, that's correct.
you can have a child or someone die in a car, correct?
Correct.
And you also said that based on these studies, a car can become very hot in 20 to 30 minutes. Is that correct?
Correct.
Let me ask you generally about the studies that you referred to. You, like every other doctor, relies on other people's work to form your own opinions, correct?
Correct.
You never did your self-research on these hot car deaths in the sense that you did research on your own.
No, I have not.
So you, like every other expert, you rely upon things that you read from other people, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That's true about a lot of what you do.
Yes, very true.
I think you said in that same part about the 20 to 30 minutes, you said the temperature can reach 115 degrees. Is that what the studies show?
That's correct. Well, yeah, it can certainly get above that high. I know some studies have shown temperatures even reaching close to 150 degrees. I don't know the correlation between that and the external temperature, but certainly, whether it be mild or temperatures above 90, they can certainly get into the 115 range in a short period of time.
Within 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah, correct.
And I think you told us earlier that death for anyone would occur at about 110 degrees, correct?
Correct.
And that's at the max, right?
Yeah, that's, again, the even temperatures, mild external temperatures in a normal heat of summer, it puts a stress on your body to have increased temperature regulation. So higher than normal temperatures are a stress to our body.
I just want to be sure I'm clear. So you're saying at 110 degrees at a max, a person would die?
If they're kept in there for a long period of time, yes.
Okay. And they could die at a lower temperature as well, correct?
Sure.
And you've indicated, I think, toward the end of your testimony on direct, that even if you took a child's temperature, had been in a car for several hours, and that temperature was higher than 110, that individual would have died long before whatever temperature they measured, correct?
That's correct.
If there was a temperature in the car of 130, or whatever the number may be, anybody in there would have died at 110 degrees.
That's correct. Yeah,
And if you testified already, even on a mild day, that would happen in 20 to 30 minutes, correct?
that's correct.
Can I have just a moment, Judge? think Mr. SD asked you about heat stroke. Did you use that phrase? I
Yeah,
can't-
yeah.
Okay. And I think it's correct to say that heat stroke would occur at 104 degrees and above, right?
That's, tends to be where it's defined, yes.
I'm sorry?
That's where it's defined. They say that, you'll have symptoms, or if you present to a hospital, let's say, they define heat exhaustion and heat stroke. There's minor differences or overlapping symptoms, but the temperature range for heat stroke is 104 and above.
Again, you yourself have never done this research. You've relied upon other people who've done
That's
this,
correct.
correct? Is it fair to say that in this particular case, you relied a lot on what you were told had occurred?
Sure, we had to, yeah.
Correct. I mean, you had no choice, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
The child had no trauma of any kind, no bruising, no broken bones, no obvious signs of injury, correct?
Or congenital abnormalities, yes.
No abnormalities. So just looking at the autopsy findings, had you not known what had occurred, would you be able to diagnose this?
No, like many types of causes of death in forensic pathology, you're relying upon scene investigation, what your investigators find, what EMS find, because there are a whole host of causes of death that really have no specific physical findings, and this is one example of that.
And you described for the state sort of the process of what goes on when you start to have heat stroke or heat exhaustion, and you go through that process until you die. You described that to the state.
Yeah, I mean, I could, yeah, I have.
You have today
Yeah.
to describe that, correct? You would agree with me that you could go through that process while you were asleep, correct?
Sure. The process of accelerated heart rate, increased sweating, dehydration can occur while you are asleep.
Just a moment. Thank you, Dr. Coleman. I have no other questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect of the doctor?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Coyne, as a medical examiner, when you examine a body, would it be fair to say that a body isn't just presented to you, but you have to talk to the investigators from the sheriff's office, from the medical examiner's office to find out what happened?
Yes, there's a large process that goes into it. So we communicate with both the EMS personnel and law enforcement who arrive on scene. We may discuss findings with hospital physicians who have seen a patient prior. We concur with, or we review medical records, laboratory testing that's done before a body comes to us. And we also employ medical legal death investigators who tend to go to the scene and who will work directly with law enforcement or EMS to gather information that's important for me during the autopsy.
And when you say important to you for the autopsy, is that to help you in determining the cause of death?
Yeah, the cause of death, the cause and manner of death for that matter, are not just determined based upon the autopsy findings. And I'd say probably more than half of the cases, they're reliant upon what we obtain from scene investigation as well as that of the law enforcement.
Defense counsel had mentioned to you about what a child would go through. Could it happen when a child is asleep? And you had said yes, is my understanding.
Yeah, because, sure, a child could be sleeping during this process, but also understand that the physiological derangements that can occur within a short window. So there could be a 10-minute period when a child will go from being aroused to being unconscious. And so when we say sleeping, yes, the child could be asleep, but could then become unconscious, or therefore not arousable. So it's hard to really differentiate, are they sleeping versus just not arousable because of underlying pathologic processes.
So because of what is happening when hyperthermia occurs, would it be fair to say that can cause the infant to become unconscious?
That's correct.
But the infant would still be experiencing the organ damage that you have described to this jury.
That's correct.
They would still be experiencing the brain swelling that you described to this jury.
Yes, and it's probably the brain swelling and lack of alterations in blood flow to the brain that causes that child to become unconscious.
So that would lead to that.
Yes.
Doctor, are you aware of what the normal abilities of a 10-month-old child would be?
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Would it be fair to say that a 10-month-old child would be incapable of unbuckling themselves from a car seat, opening a car door, and leaving this hot environment they are in?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions of this witness?
No, sir, I have no questions.
Okay. Can this witness be excused?
Yes.
Very well, doctor, you are excused, and thank you, sir. Would the state call its next witness, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Donald Blanton.
Mr. Blanton, if you will face the clerk and raise your right hand to be sworn, please, sir.
Do you solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony that you give will be the truth and the whole truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Have a seat, and I'll ask you to pull your chair up so you can speak right into the microphone.
Yes, sir.
And then I'm going to ask you to state your name and then spell it for the court reporter, please.
Donald Blanton, D-O-N-A-L-D-B-L-A-N-T-O-N.
Thank you, sir. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning.
Yes, sir.
Will you please introduce yourself to the jury?
I'm Donald Blanton. I'm the Assistant Fire Chief for Baker County Fire Rescue.
How long have you worked with Baker County Fire Rescue?
This January will be 3 years.
And can you please tell the jury your training and experience in fire rescue?
I've been in the business just short of 35 years. Started in the business in 1989. Most recently, I retired 3 years ago as a battalion chief of the city of Jacksonville, oversaw the western side of Duval County, and then came here after retirement, and I've been working for Baker County for the last 3 years.
In the course of your duties, did you or have you had the occasion to work with instrumentation that measures the heat of an area or a fire?
Yes, sir. In the late 90s, we started using equipment called thermal imaging, and it's a thermal imaging camera, and I've been using one ever since. It's part of our business, and it's mainly used in firefighting, which you can discover everything from heat signatures of all kinds, but it's a very scientific piece of equipment that military developed, and we've been using it in our sector ever since.
And you've had training in using this equipment?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Have you used it frequently in your occupation?
Yeah, I would say it probably gets used at every structure fire that I've been involved in for the last 25 years.
I want to take you back to July 19th of 2023. On that day, did you respond to 4596 Estate Street here in McClenny?
Yes, sir.
Why did you do that, sir?
I had been out of the county on personal business, and I got a call that they had some sort of an emergency in the county, and I was requested to come to the scene and bring my camera, and that was specifically why they called me.
And when you arrived, can you please tell the jury what you observed?
When I got to the scene, there was a car in the driveway. Obviously, all the vehicles from the sheriff's office were there. Fire rescue units that had been on the scene were already gone and had left the scene. I'm assuming they were at the hospital at that time. So when I got there, it was just law enforcement.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
For identification. Do you recognize what that is?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
That's myself holding the thermal imaging camera, looking into the vehicle next to the detective. Yes, sir.
And
Yes, sir. Yes,
Has
sir.
been tampered or altered in any way?
No, sir.
Your Honor, the state would seek to admit State's Exhibit, I believe it was K, as next number.
Yes, sir, that's what's on there.
Any objection?
No objection.
Very well, then it will be received as State's Exhibit 11.
Permission to publish, Your Honor.
Granted.
Sir, if you'll turn around for us at the TV screen behind you. Can you please describe for the jury what you're doing here in this photograph?
The camera that you see that's in my hand, when you have it turned on the screen itself, in the center of the screen is a crosshair very similar to what you might see with like a rifle scope. So when you look at the screen, everything that you're looking at has a heat signature, and it's extremely sensitive to the point that if I put my hand on this table and took it off and looked at the wood with that camera, it could see my handprint. It's extremely sensitive. And I was looking into the interior of the car to see if I could get a signature off the interior components of the car, and on the side of the screen actually has a temperature scale that tells you what that number is, and that's what I was doing.
And can you please tell the jury what readings you got on July 19th?
To my knowledge, it was in the 130 range. I believe 133, but when I got the number, I told the law enforcement what the number was so they could write it in the report.
And when you were using the machine, were you aimed inside of the vehicle?
Yes, sir.
And looking at the photograph, can you please tell the jury what time this photograph was taken?
That says 13:42, which is 1:42 in the afternoon. Yes, sir.
And when you arrived, was the vehicle's door already open?
I can't remember. Sorry.
It's okay. One moment, Your Honor. One more question. Based on your training experience with heat in the course of your duties, would it be fair to say that when the door is open on the vehicle, the temperature would come down the longer the door is open?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
No other questions. Any witness?
Cross-examination?
I have no questions, Your Honor.
Okay, can this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
You are excused. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Would the state please call its next witness?
Detective Brad Dougherty.
Raise your right hand, please, sir.
You solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony that you will give will be the truth and the whole truth, so help you God.
Okay, sir, if you'll come up and have a seat, adjust the microphone so that you can speak into it, so that we can all hear you. And then I will ask you first to state your name and then spell your name for the court report.
Yes, sir. My name is Brad Dougherty. First name is B-R-A-D. Last name spelled D-O-U-G-H-E-R-T-Y.
Thank you, sir. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Will you please introduce yourself to the jury?
As you heard, my name is Brad Dougherty. I'm captain with the Baker County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been with the Baker County Sheriff's Office?
Well, I've worked there off and on twice, but totally probably about 17 years.
Will you tell the jury your total background in law enforcement?
I have approximately 23, 24 years in law enforcement. I've held several different positions from supervisor on patrol to lieutenant over investigations. The major part of my career has been as a detective, major crimes, working homicides here as well as Clay County.
I want to take you back to July of 2023. What was your position at that time?
I was a detective at the time.
And were you supervising? Were you supervising other detectives, or what was your position there?
No, I was just a detective working mostly major crimes.
On July 19th of 2023, were you called out to a house here in McClenny regarding the death of a child?
We were called, not specifically to the house, but we were contacted by the on-duty patrol lieutenant that advised us of the situation, that the infant child was being transported to the hospital, and that there was still a scene on a state street.
Where did you go?
So there were 4 of us in investigations that day. We divided the team up. Had Detective Cohn and Detective Curry went to a state street. Myself and Detective Griffin went to Ed Frazier Hospital.
When you got to Ed Frazier's hospital, what did you do first?
So by the time I got to the hospital, they'd already pronounced Araya deceased. So at that point, I went in the room and began conducting a body exam.
What is a body exam?
Body exam for a detective, a body exam is when we respond to a death. We're looking at the body externally for any visible signs of trauma, like stab wounds, bullet holes, signs of strangulation, or it could be from a fall, broken bones, things of that nature.
And when you performed the body exam in this case, what were your findings?
I didn't find any signs of trauma to the child, but I did note that the child has her skin was very hot to the touch, and this was approximately 30 minutes after she had been in the hospital, which is climate controlled.
Did you find that to be abnormal?
I did. I mean, it was abnormal. The skin was very hot, and normally after a person passes away, the body temperature will begin to fall, or it will go to the temperature of whatever environment the body is in. So, being in this case that the child's skin was very hot, I knew that the child had been in a hot place.
What did you do with that information?
Once I discovered that, I came out to the medical staff and requested that they provide me with a temperature, internal and external temperature of the child.
And what were those temperatures?
The external temperature was 102 degrees. The internal temperature was at least 110. And I say at least because the thermometer wouldn't read past 110.
And was the medical examiner's office called?
I did call them, yes.
And did you meet with the medical examiner's office or their agents at the hospital?
I met with their investigator. I waited at the hospital for the investigator to arrive so that I can relay my findings to the investigator, as well as basically turn the body over to her.
And at that point in your investigation, after concluding that conversation with the medical examiners, where did you go next?
I went to the sheriff's office.
And why did you do that?
I knew that the defendant had already been transported to the sheriff's office, so I went up there to conduct an interview with her.
And do you recognize the defendant here in the courtroom today?
I do.
Can you please identify her by an article of clothing?
She's wearing a tan-colored jacket, sitting between her attorneys.
And did you ask her to do an interview with you?
I did.
Did she agree to that?
She did.
Did she tell you what happened on July 19th of 2023?
She did. She gave me the story of what took place that morning, or that day.
So let's start with why the defendant was where she was. Did she tell you why she was at that house on a state street?
Yes, in the interview, it came out that she had been babysitting for the Pages twice a week, I believe it was. So she was there to pick up Araya on that morning to babysit Araya. She was going to take Araya to the Pascal residence on a state street and babysit Araya there with the Pascal's 3 children.
So she acknowledged to you that she was caring for the child.
Yes.
So starting with how the defendant got to that location, how the day started for the defendant on July 19th, did she tell you what she did, the steps she took to get to that street?
To get to, I'm sorry, to get to.
To get to Estate Street. Where did the
Oh,
defendant
yes.
stay?
So she told me once she got to the Pages residence, which is on Shuey Avenue, that she then was driving to State Street. But she told me the path that she took was US 90 to 121 south, and on the way to Estate Street, which is just south of the interstate, she went to Burger King. And while at Burger King, she noticed that the line was too long, so she just made a loop around the parking lot and went on to the Pascal residence.
And were you able to discover what type of vehicle she was driving?
Yes, I believe it was 2013 Chevrolet Tahoe.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Detective, I'm handing you what's been previously marked as State's Composite Exhibit L1 and 2. Do you recognize those?
Yes, I recognize where they're at, yes.
And what are they?
It is a overview map of McClenny showing Shuey Avenue, where the Pages live, and showing the location of the Burger King.
Those fairly and accurately describe the locations that the defendant discussed as far as her route on July 19th.
That's correct. And then the other photograph would be from Burger King to her final destination of Estate Street, where she was going to babysit.
Your Honor, the State would tender State's Exhibit L1 and 2, as I believe State's 12A and B.
Any,
Just a moment. No objection, Your Honor.
very well, then they will be received as State's Exhibits 12A and B.
Permission to publish, Your Honor?
Granted.
Detective, if you could turn around for us here. This would be State's 12A. And can you please describe what is pictured on this map?
At the very top where it says 239 Shuey Avenue, this is going to be the location where the defendant picked up Araya, and Burger King at the bottom where she first went to try to go to Burger King, when I stated that she said the line was too long.
And on the top right, it shows a distance of 1.93 miles. That would be as a crow flies, so to speak. Is that fair?
That's correct.
So it would be farther than that via vehicle on the road?
Yes, probably approximately 2 miles, maybe just a little over 2 miles, not very much.
And this would be State's 12B. Again, if you could please describe for the jury what we're seeing in this one.
On the far left is the Burger King that she went to, just off 121. On the right is Estate Street, which is the Pascal residence where she went to babysit all the children.
And it appears the distance on this map is roughly what?
Less than a half a mile.
And Detective, were there any steps you took to confirm this was her route?
Yes, we have LPRs in this county, which is license plate readers, and I was able to run her license plate in the license plate reader database, which showed her vehicle passing through the intersection of 121 and 90, heading south on 121 at 7:59 a.m.
What is a license plate reader?
It's basically a camera that's set up that captures the vehicle and the license plate of every vehicle that crosses the path of the camera.
And do you have access to a database to pull up these
I do. Most law enforcement does. It's something that's used to help with crime throughout the entire country.
And as part of your investigation in this case, you searched the license plate reading database?
Yes,
And that's when you found this hit you just described for us?
that's correct.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Detective, I'm handing you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit M. Do you recognize that?
I do.
And what is it?
It is a captured photo of the vehicle passing through the LPR, the license plate reader, and it shows the map and location of where that camera is.
And this is the result you obtained in this investigation that when you were confirming the defendant's route?
Yes.
Your Honor, the State would request to enter State's Exhibit M as State's 13.
Any objection?
defendant?
My understanding was she arrived at the house at 7:50 a.m. and left at 7:55 a.m. She passed through the LPR at 7:59, and between 7:59 and 8:15 is when she went to Burger King and arrived at Estate Street.
So she was at the Estate Street roughly 8:15 a.m.?
8:15, yes.
And during your interview, did you understand the defendant to say that she had communicated with the victim's mom?
She did when she first arrived there at Estate Street.
And when, based on your investigation, was Araya discovered in the vehicle?
Around 1:12 at p.m.
So 8:15 a.m. to roughly 1:12 p.m.
Yes.
And in your investigation, can you tell the jury what the temperature was that day?
It was projected to be 96 to 98 degrees. I know in my vehicle, it gives you a display. I don't know how accurate it is, but it was roughly 98 degrees is what the temperature was showing.
One moment, Your Honor. Thank you, Detective. Lieutenant, the witness.
Cross-examination?
Good morning. It's Captain now, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Captain Doherty, you indicated that you've been in law enforcement for about 24 years, give or take,
23 to 24, correct?
some here and some in Clay County.
Right.
You said during your direct examination that you sent Detective Curry to the Estate Street address, correct?
That is correct.
And you and Detective Griffin, I think you said, went to the hospital.
That is correct.
And in the interview, that is Detective Curry's sitting there with you, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You indicated that when you went to the hospital, you were advised that Araya was deceased.
Yes.
Okay. So you went into the room where Araya was and you looked at her body for any signs of trauma, you said.
Yes.
And that would be things like bruising, redness, anything that would indicate any type of possible abuse of any kind, correct?
Right. That is correct.
You saw none of that.
I saw none of that.
And I'm assuming that you've had some training in identifying signs of trauma, correct?
I have, yes.
So you would have noticed that had there been one.
Yes.
State Attorney, let me back up a little bit. Prior to going into the room to speak with Rhonda Jewell on the interview, had you spoken to her at all?
I have not.
Okay. And the interview room that we see is inside the Baker County Sheriff's Office Detective Division, correct?
Yes, the detective division.
Okay, and do you have several rooms like this where you interview individuals?
We have two. We have one in patrol and one in investigations.
And these are all equipped with a camera that we see, correct?
Yes.
And that's to record the interview
Correct.
so that someone later on can hear exactly what somebody said,
That is right.
okay? So when you were asked questions earlier by Mr. King about what Ms. Jewell told you, okay, both before and after we watched the video today, you would agree with me that what she told you would be what this jury saw on that video, correct?
That is correct.
So if your recall of that during your testimony was different, you would rely upon that video, correct?
Correct.
Captain, Mr. King asked you, was Ms. Jewell upset? And you said that she was upset and crying, I think is how you described it, correct?
Yes.
Now, she had been at the sheriff's office for a little while at this point, correct?
Yes, I believe that interview was around, if I remember what the clock said, around 2:40.
911 was called at 1:12, so.
You know about what time she arrived at the jail? I mean, at the sheriff's office?
I don't, I was at the hospital when she arrived there.
But she had been there for a while.
Yes.
When you arrived, she had been talking to another employee of the sheriff's office, correct?
That is correct.
Would you agree with me that when you first saw her, she was more upset than she appeared on this video?
Yes, she was crying. She was very upset. Probably crying more than what she did in the interview.
You would agree with me that what we see, she's calmed down some at that point, correct?
Yes.
Detective Curry read Rhonda Jewell her rights, correct?
That's correct.
And what are anybody's rights when they're being questioned by sheriff's office?
What are the rights?
Yes, sir.
That they don't have to speak to us. They have a right to have an attorney present. If they wish to talk to us, they can stop talking to us at any time.
And Ms. Jewell waived all those rights, correct?
She did.
She voluntarily told you, or talked to you in this case.
Yes,
She could have easily said no.
yes.
In the video, we see Mrs. Jewell sitting there with what appears to be a white shirt and some type of light blue shorts, maybe.
Yes.
Are you aware whether or not she had changed her shorts before you interviewed her?
I'm aware that she was wearing pants that I was told that she had urinated in, and she had to change.
Was she changed by this time, or do you recall?
I don't recall.
Just to verify, the license plate reader that we spoke about and we have a picture of,
Yes.
you said the time passing through the intersection was 7:59, according to the license plate reader?
I believe so, yes.
Any reason to doubt that's accurate?
I have no reason to doubt that.
I think Mr. King asked you a general question about how long it would take to drive from the Shuey Avenue home of Brooke and Justice Page to Stacy Pascal's home on Estate Street, correct?
Correct.
And you gave an estimate of that, right?
I did.
But that could vary, correct?
It could vary, yes.
Okay. You weren't aware of what the traffic conditions that particular day were?
I was not, however, I was at the sheriff's office. Had there been something major going on, I would have been aware of it.
But again, a slight traffic delay you wouldn't know about at the sheriff's office, correct?
I would not.
And again, you may catch all the red lights one day and all the green lights the next, right?
That's very true.
Okay. Just have just a moment. Detective Doherty, just to clarify a couple of quick points. You testified earlier that Mrs. Jewell told you that she forgot the child was in the car. Is that correct?
She did say that, yes.
At some point after this interview, did you or Detective Curry or anyone at your direction obtain Rhonda Jewell's cell phone that she had that day?
Yes, it was obtained, I believe 2 days maybe after that.
Was that at your request or your direction?
It was not.
Okay. Do you know who asked for that?
I believe Lieutenant Mancini asked for that.
Now, who is Lieutenant Mancini?
He is lieutenant over investigations.
So he's head of investigations?
Is.
Right. He hasn't testified here, but he advised somebody to get the phone, correct?
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that that phone was brought to you voluntarily?
Correct, it was.
Correct. There was no search warrant to get the phone, correct?
Not to get it, no.
Right. And the passcode for that phone was given to you voluntarily as well, correct?
To my understanding, yes.
And although you may not have done this, other detectives looked through that phone, correct?
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
You may.
Captain, I'm going to ask you to look at what has been marked as Defense Exhibit 1 for identification,
Okay.
A1. Tell me what this is.
It is a cell phone blue in color with a, says flowered case.
Is that the cell phone of Rhonda Jewell?
I'm unaware. I never had contact with the cell phone.
Mr. Nelson, if you got any more questions, let's ask them. We need to move on.
I have another question, sir.
Okay. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. May we approach very quickly?
Yes. Mr. King, redirect.
Yes, sir. Detective Dougherty, the cell phone defense counsel asked you about, you said it had been 2 days after
I
that?
believe that was the time frame. Yes.
Do you have any knowledge of where that cell phone was for those 2 days?
I believe it went home with her husband.
So based on your investigation and communications with the defendant in this case, were you able to establish who was responsible for Araya Page between 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. on July 19th of 2023?
Yes, the defendant was.
No other questions.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
Can this witness be excused, subject to recall?
Yes, sir.
You are excused. Thank you, sir. Would the state call its next witness?
Your Honor, the state rests.
State announces rest. Members of the jury, we have some matters that we're going to need to take up outside your presence. So I'm going to ask you, if you will, please, to return to the jury room. Again, do not discuss the case at this time.
All rise.
Does the defense have a motion?
Be seated.
Sir, we would move for a judgment.
I can't hear you. Is that microphone on?
I think it is.
Okay, either you're too tall or it's too short, one or the other.
Your Honor, at this point, we would move for a judgment of acquittal. Based on the facts presented in the state's case, no reasonable jury would be able to find Ms. Jewell guilty of the charges. Specifically, the first charge, manslaughter by culpable negligence, the state's burden was to prove culpable negligence. That standard is a gross and flagrant character, evincing reckless disregard for human life or the safety of persons exposed to its dangerous effects, or the entire want of care that would arise the presumption of indifference to the consequences, or such wantonness or recklessness or grossly careless disregard of the safety and the welfare of the public, or that reckless indifference to the rights of others. Further, as the jury instruction states in the case law indicates, Ms. Jewell would need to consciously follow a course of conduct that she knew or should have known would likely result in death or serious bodily injury. The state has not presented evidence that this was a conscious act by Ms. Jewell to leave the child in the car. I've talked about this case in previous motions. It's Kish v. State, 145 Southern 3rd, 223. That's Florida's first DCA. It was out, holding was in 2014. In that case, a mother changed her children's bus route from her home to the father and the stepmother's house. Unbeknownst to that mother, the children were ill, and they would be unsupervised when they got to the house. There was a trial on that. The children became very ill. The state charged her with aggravated child abuse and culpable negligence, a misdemeanor. In that case, it was a bench trial. The first DCA reversed the trial court who found her guilty of culpable negligence. Their reason for doing that was because she had no knowledge that the children were ill. She had no knowledge that they would be unsupervised, and without that knowledge, it can't show a reckless disregard for the safety of the children. In this case, the state presented significant evidence that this was not a conscious choice. The testimony of Ms. Purchell, that Jewell told her that she forgot the children, forgot that the child was even with her. That video that was just played indicates the same, that she lost awareness of the child, not that she made the conscious choice to leave the child in the car and go into the house. Just one moment. In addition, Ms. Page testified that she was the one that loaded Aria into the car, put the diaper bags and everything back there. There has been testimony of things that could have distracted Ms. Jewell that has come out in the state's case. And for those reasons, we don't believe that this was a conscious choice, and we don't believe a jury would be able to find that this was a conscious choice. In addition, culpable negligence, it's not just considering what happened on this day we would need to look at the totality of the circumstances. That's the history that Ms. Jewell had with the child, the history with the family, her history of care. There's a couple cases that it talks about that. One is Getsy v. State, 193 Southern 2nd, 679 out of the 4th DCA from 1966, and Tipton v. State, Florida Supreme Court case, found it 97 Southern 2nd, 277. In Getsy, it's a man that was playing with a loaded firearm around his wife that he had got for Christmas. I believe he had been drinking. He was playing with the hammer of it, sat down on his wife's lap, and accidentally shot her, killing her. When the court evaluated that case, they looked at his care for his wife, their history together and whatnot, and found that this one isolated incident was not enough to show a reckless disregard for the safety of his wife. Similarly, there's Walsingham v. State, that's 272 Southern 2nd, 215. I believe it's a Florida Supreme Court case out in holding on 1973. That a father shot his child with a gun after he'd been consuming some alcohol. There was testimony presented that the child was very close with the father, and that was not found to be culpably negligent. So in this case, the state's witnesses explained that Ms. Jewell was an exceptional babysitter. She regularly played with Aria during the course of the time that they were together. The parents never had any issues with Ms. Jewell until this incident happened. In fact, they sought her out to ensure that she could be the babysitter. She has significant ties to that family. They were extremely close. She went to family gatherings and whatnot before she was a babysitter. And both parents agreed that Ms. Jewell, prior to that day, took exceptional care of Aria. In addition, looking at the evidence that was presented of her demeanor when law enforcement arrived, she was extremely distraught, was crying uncontrollably. Ms. Page testified when Mrs. Jewell realized that Aria was still in the car, rushed towards the car, threw her out of the way to try to get into the vehicle. We understand that 5 hours of being in a motor vehicle is a very long time for a child, but the state's expert testified that this death could have occurred within 20 or 30 minutes. So all of these factors the court needs to take into consideration when determining whether this is culpably negligent or not, and the jury would need to take that into consideration too. And given all of the factors at play here that indicate Ms. Jewell regularly provided the care that this child needed, given her demeanor and the history, I don't believe a reasonable jury would be able to find that her conduct on that day rises to the level of culpable negligence. The state's theory here seems to suggest a results-driven analysis that is not, does not comport with the law. It is a very sad event that happened, but people can die and it not be culpable negligence. So for that reason, we believe the count 1 has not been proven, and the court should enter a judgment of acquittal on that count. As for the count 2 felony murder, this felony murder was predicated on leaving a child unattended in a motor vehicle, which we have a motion pending to insert a mens rea into that. But if a mens rea is not inserted, that would be basically a strict liability felony murder, which there's a case, Mahan v. State, it's 377 Southern 2nd, 1158, Florida, 1979, out of the Florida Supreme Court. In that case, it talks about the constitutionality of felony murder, and specifically it states that felony murder is constitutional because the intent for the underlying felony will transfer up to the murder. In this case, without an intent element, there is nothing to transfer, which indicates that this is probably not a correct felony to predicate for felony murder. One moment. Here, the state hasn't provided any evidence that Ms. Jewell even intended to leave the child in the car. I don't believe that there's any intent to transfer, and I think that is problematic for the felony murder charge. In addition, this would effectively bootstrap felony murder to a strict liability crime, which is not, does not comport with the jurisprudence. As far as predicating it on leaving a child unattended in a motor vehicle, there's a couple cases that evaluate felony murder in Florida compared to the New York statute. One of them is State v. Studevant, 94 Southern 3rd 434, out of the Florida Supreme Court from 2012. In that case, it discusses aggravated child abuse, but it indicates that because it is one of the enumerated felonies for the, I think it's subsection 3, that this is largely allowed. But when evaluating the New York statute, it talks about when there is an unenumerated crime charged as the predicate, and the death is directly tied to the crime and not like a collateral consequence of it. In instances such as that, felony murder may be inappropriate based on Studevant and Robles v. State, 188 Southern 2nd 789, Florida Supreme Court, 1966. I have not found a case that specifically addresses this situation with a unenumerated felony that is strict liability and its ability to predicate felony murder. But based on the holdings in these two cases, I don't believe that that is appropriate, nor do I believe that it can be a predicate because there is not a mens rea associated with that crime. So for that reason, we would also move for a judgment of acquittal on the felony murder. If I can just have one moment. Further, we would move for a judgment of acquittal on count 3 as well. We have filed a motion in this case explaining our belief that it requires her to knowingly leave a child in a car based on the plain language of the statute and the jurisprudence. So for that reason, there has been no evidence presented that indicated that this was a conscious effort on Ms. Jewell's part to leave the child in the vehicle. And without that, count 3 has not been proven. So we would ask the court to move, grant an acquittal on counts 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all I got.
State?
Thank you, Your Honor. Taking the facts in the most favorable light to the state has shown a prima facie case as to counts 1, 2, and 3. Starting first with count 1, Taylor v. State, 363 Southern 3rd, 126. It's the first DCA 2023 is the controlling case, and it discusses the jury instructions. Namely, it states, culpable negligence is consciously doing an act or following a course of conduct that the defendant must have known or reasonably should have known was likely to cause death or great bodily harm. Your Honor, the state has put forward the facts sufficient to have this case go to the jury. The defense seems to argue that phantom elements adding a level of intent as to both counts 1 and 3. I would cite Leet v. State, 595 Southern 2nd 959, 1991 from the 2nd DCA. And this was a case involving culpable negligence. And in that case, they said that culpable negligence is not a common law theory of criminal intent. It is an objective standard. Thus, in that case, it was not essential for the defendant to have actual personal knowledge of his omission that would lead to death or great bodily harm. So it's an objective standard. There is no conscious knowing required in this standard. And they finished the paragraph in that particular section by saying that it may sometimes seem harsh and may very well punish a defendant for a crime lacking mens rea. Nevertheless, it was the legislator's prerogative to select this objective standard for the use in child abuse cases. So as to count 1, in dealing with culpable negligence, the state has put forward sufficient facts that this needs to go to the jury to determine whether or not this was culpable negligence. It is an objective person standard, and the facts that have been put forth are sufficient to show that prima facie case. As to counts 2 and 3, this is not New York. This is Florida. And as to the grounds upon which it seems defense, again, is seeking to insert an additional element that the legislature is not required in order for it to be a felony under count 3. The way that this is charged is any other felony that is not enumerated, and that's in paragraph 4 of 782.04. Your Honor, there was no limitation by the legislature that would prohibit certain types of felonies. If that was the intent, they would have written it that way. So based on all the information, there is sufficient facts for counts 1, 2, and 3, namely that the facts that have been presented as to what happened on July 19th of 2023. The defendant remembered going to the house. She remembered everything that happened. This wasn't some medical episode, some amnesia, or some stroke, or something that would have precluded her from engaging in the duty she accepted. The jury has heard that she accepted payment to be the caretaker of this child, and now it's time for the jury to be able to determine whether or not this rises to the level of culpable negligence based on what they have heard. And then as to count 3, sufficient evidence and facts have been put forth that the child was left in the vehicle. The defendant admitted she left the defendant in the or the victim in the vehicle, and that it was for over 15 minutes, and then the resulting harm thereof. So based on the legal standards before Your Honor and this court, the state has put forward a sufficient case, and we would ask the court to deny the defense's judgment of acquittal request.
Okay, defense rebuttal?
Your Honor, I would just point out the Leeds v. State case that the state cited. There we go. I don't believe that that is correct. First of all, it's out of the second DCA. I don't believe it's binding on this court. And the Leeds case would directly contradict the first DCA's holding from the Kish case in 2014, mostly because if this objective standard in consciousness was not applicable, then the opposite conclusion would be reached in Kish, which it is not. So for that reason, we would stand by our previous arguments.
Thank you. Okay, with regard to all 3 counts, I do find that each of those counts does present a question for the jury. So at this time, the motion for judgment of acquittal at the close of the state's evidence is denied. Is the defense ready to go forward at this point?
Yes, sir, we have some witnesses that we recall that I think the court had ruled back in September they may not be allowed, but we need to proffer that.
Okay, why don't we, how long is this proffer going to take?
I think there's 5 of them total, Judge, so.
What are they supposed to testify? Generally, what was their testimony?
They're going to testify they've known Ms. Jewell for some period of time.
Character evidence.
She's watched their children.
Character evidence.
Well, of course, the conduct as well, Judge, as far as we're concerned, but yes.
Well, okay, bring them on, let's do it. Would you raise your right hand to be sworn, please?
Do you solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony that you will give will be the truth and the whole truth, so help you God? Yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to have a seat, sit up close to the microphone, adjust it so you can speak into it, and then I want you to state your name and then spell your name for the court reporter.
My name is Mallory Rosepowler, Mallory Rosepiler.
Counsel?
Ms. Rosepowler, I think we've known you as Mallory Burnshead, correct?
Yes,
I think when you were spoken to a few months ago, that's what your last name was?
yes.
Okay. Ms. Rosepowler, how long have you lived in Baker County?
21 years all my life.
All your life? And do you know a Rhonda Jewell?
Yes,
Do you see her in the courtroom today?
yes.
Can you describe what she's wearing for me?
She's wearing a tan coat and a white shirt.
Ask the court to verify that she's identified Ms. Jewell.
The record will reflect that she has identified the defendant.
You've known her all your life,
Yes.
okay? And in what capacity have you known her?
What?
How have you known her?
She's a close family friend.
Have you ever, at any point in time, asked Mrs. Rhonda Jewell to care or babysit or watch your children?
Yes.
Okay, and how many children do you have?
One.
Okay. How old is your child?
She's 4.
Is that a boy or a girl?
Girl.
When did you ask Mrs. Rhonda Jewell to watch her sit for your child?
When my daughter was 1.
And and what year would that have been?
2021.
And how long did Rhonda Jewell watch your child?
A couple months.
Was that on a daily basis or
It was 3 days a week, I want to say. It wasn't every day.
3 days?
Yes.
At the time you were in high school, I believe, still?
Yes.
And how long during the day did Miss Rhonda Jewell watch your daughter?
She watched her from about 8 to 8:30 to 1 to 1:30 in the afternoon.
And was that at her home or your home?
It was at Mike and Kaylee Rogers' home.
Are they friends of yours?
Yes.
Would Rhonda Jewell come pick up your daughter, or would you deliver her to Mike?
She would pick her up from my house.
And then would she return the child to you, or would you pick the child up?
It just depended on the day. One day she would bring her back to my house, or me and my mom would pick her up from Rhonda.
Did you ever have occasion to see Rhonda Jewell interacting with your child?
Yes.
And would you describe Miss Jewell as playing with your child?
Yes.
Was she caring for your child?
Yes.
Did she seem engaged with your daughter?
Yes.
Did she ever spend an unusual amount of time on her cell phone?
No.
Was she spending her time with your daughter?
Yes.
Okay. Ever had any concerns for the safety or welfare of your child?
No.
And I assume that you stopped using Rhonda Jewell because your child, were able to care for the child
Yes.
yourself? Okay. Just one moment. I have no other questions.
Any cross-examination?
Very brief, Your Honor. Ma'am, you're not a witness to this case. You weren't there the day that this occurred on Estate Street?
No.
Do you know Brooke Page or
I know-
Justice Page?
I know them through Rhonda.
Through Rhonda, okay. But you didn't witness any of these events?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any redirect of this witness?
No, sir.
Can she be excused at this point?
Not at this point, Judge. No, she should be held at this point. Ask her to be held at this point.
I'm sorry, what?
Have her stay under subpoena, Judge.
Okay, sorry. She's excused, subject to recall?
Yes, sir.
Okay, gotcha. If you'll step out, please, ma'am. Would you call your next witness, please?
Yes, sir. They're coming now.
Who is it?
I'm not sure.
Ma'am, would you raise your right hand to be sworn, and the clerk is going to swear you in?
Do you solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony that you will give will be the truth and the whole truth, so help you God?
Have a seat, please, and sit up close to the microphone, and you may need to pull it down so you can speak into it fairly closely. Now, I'm going to ask you at this time if you'll state your name and then spell your name for us.
Yes, sir. Kaylee Rogers, Kaleyrogers.
Thank you, ma'am. Counsel?
Ms. Rogers, how long have you lived in Baker County?
Roughly 10 years.
And you're married to Mike Rogers, is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Do you know Rhonda Jewell?
Yes, sir.
And how do you know her?
Rhonda Jewell was the caregiver of my 2 daughters.
Is that how you first met her?
Yes, sir.
And approximately when was that?
2016.
How was she introduced to you?
My husband went into her sister's salon one day. We were looking for someone to watch our daughter when I went back to work, and he went in just to speak and say hello, and he mentioned it while he was in there, and she said she was interested, and so we set up a time, and a couple days later she came over to our house, and I was able to meet her, and she was able to meet the baby, but that's how I met her.
Did your husband know Mrs. Jewell before that?
He did.
How did he know her, if you know?
He worked with her years ago at Winn-Dixie, I believe, and then knew of her throughout the community.
Do you remember when it was that you first spoke to Rhonda Jewell, approximately, regarding caring for your child?
November of 2016.
Had you just had your child?
I was at the end of my maternity leave, so she was about 3 months old.
Was this your first child?
Yes, sir.
And you needed someone to watch your daughter because you were going back to work?
Yes, sir.
So did you meet with Rhonda Jewell a few times before she started caring for your daughter?
She came to the house one day and spent an hour and a half with us, spent time with the baby. I got to know her, got to know me a little bit. And then the next time I saw her in person was the first time that she took care of our oldest.
When you saw your Rhonda Jewell interacting with your daughter, the first occasion, was she engaged with your daughter?
Very much so.
Do you remember approximately when she actually started watching the child? Was that November 2016?
Yes, sir. It was the end of November.
And where would Rhonda Jewell watch her child at?
She came to our house every morning.
And that's here in Baker County.
Yes, sir.
How many days a week?
5 days a week.
And how many hours a day?
Roughly the entire time I was at work, so 8 to 4.
And how long did that last? What length of time as far as months or years?
She kept our oldest. It was from 2016 to 2021 that she had our girls on a regular daily basis.
Now, you've mentioned girls. Was there a second child that you had that she also cared for?
Yes, sir.
And when was that child born?
February 2018.
And when did Rhonda Jewell start watching that child?
I believe it was April of 2018.
And I think you indicated up until 2021, was that the oldest child or the youngest child?
The youngest.
The youngest, okay.
Yes, sir.
Again, was this always generally at your home?
Yes, sir. She would come to our home in the morning, and then if she had things she needed to do that day, or if there was something that we needed help with, she would take them from the home and run errands or whatever she needed to do, and then come back.
Did you have occasions during this period of time from November 2016 to 2021 to observe Rhonda Jewell interacting with one or both your daughters?
Yes, sir.
And how would you describe that interaction?
Very natural, very motherly.
Was she engaged with them?
Yes, sir.
Did she ever spend any time on her cell phone?
Every now and then I would see her on her phone, but it was a phone call, or she was showing me something or showing the girls something, or...
Did you ever have any concerns about your children in the care of Rhonda Jewell?
Never.
Is it also correct to say that you invited Miss Jewell on some vacations to help watch the children?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How often was that?
Every summer. I believe it started in 2019. And then every summer after.
Do you know Brooke and Justice Page?
Yes, sir.
And how do you know them?
I know them through Rhonda.
Okay. Do you know Brooke and Justice Page's parents?
Yes.
Ms. Rogers, after July 19, 2023, did Rhonda Jewell ever talk to you about what happened on July 19, 2023?
We've talked about the emotional part of it.
Did she tell you what happened that day?
Yes, I've heard her walk herself through what happened that day.
What did she tell you?
That she picked up the
Objection,
child.
Your Honor.
Sustained.
Thank you.
Just wait a minute.
Judge, this is proper. Can I have the witness answer the question?
Yeah, go ahead and have her answer.
That she picked up the child, went to the other family's home to care for their children. She was going to stop and get something to eat on her way, but she was worried about being late, so she ended up not stopping. She got to the house, got out of her vehicle, went inside, and carried on about her day.
Did she indicate to you, in talking to you, when she knew that she had left or forgotten Araya in the vehicle?
When Brooke got there.
Just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
One last thing, Mrs. Rogers. Was there any period of time where Rhonda Jewell had your children for an extended period of time?
Yes, sir.
And when was that?
May of 2022.
And how long did she care for your children continuously during that period of time?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. Were they always with her?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Day and night?
Yes, sir. My husband had a cardiac arrest and
Yes,
was in the hospital for 3 weeks.
Any concerns about the care your daughters received at that point in time?
Absolutely not. I know that they were well taken care of, and yes, I'm very thankful for her.
I have no other questions, Judge.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Rogers, you were not at the house on the State Street the day that this occurred on July 19th.
No, sir.
So you did not see on that day when the defendant was supposed to be caring for Araya Page.
No, sir.
Other than what the defendant has told you, you really know nothing about the case.
No, sir.
Okay. When you say no, you mean, is that a yes, you know nothing about the case?
Right. Yes, just what I've heard.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of this witness?
No, sir.
Okay. Same excusal? Okay, you are excused but subject to recall, so if you'll step outside, please, ma'am. Thank you. If you'll raise your right hand and be sworn by the clerk, please.
You solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony you will give will be the truth and the whole truth, so help you God? Yes.
Have a seat, please, ma'am. I'll ask you to sit up close to that microphone and adjust it down if you need to so that you can speak right into it. I'll ask you, first of all, if you will state your name and then spell your name.
Ashley Altman, Ashley Altman.
Thank you, ma'am. Counsel?
Ms. Altman, how long have you lived in Baker County? Excuse me.
I have lived in Baker for 22 years.
Do you know Rhonda Jewell?
Yes.
How did you first meet Mrs. Jewell?
I met her through my coworker. She is her sister.
And her coworker, your coworker owned a salon, correct?
Yes.
And that was Rhonda Jewell's sister?
Yes.
How long ago was that?
That was 17 and a half years ago.
At that time, did you have any children?
Yes, I had 2 at that time.
At that point in time, did you ever ask Rhonda Jewell to care or babysit for your children, one or more of your kids?
Not at that time.
Okay. When did you ask her to do that?
I asked her when I had my daughter. She was 3 years old, so in 2013, somewhere around there.
So in 2013, you asked Mrs. Jewell to watch your youngest child, your daughter, correct?
Yes,
And did she do that?
she did.
And generally, how often did she watch your child and where?
She normally had her 2 days a week, because I only worked 2 days at the time. A lot of times she would keep her at the shop where I was. She would kind of tend to her while I was working. And then there were times where she would take her for the day, run errands, take her to kids' practices, whatever she needed to do.
So on these 2 days a week, how many hours would Rhonda Jewell care for your daughter?
It was a full day, 9 to 5-ish, maybe sometimes later, sometimes, it was around 8 hours or so.
Majority of the time, was she watching your daughter in the salon where you worked?
Most of the time, she would be in the salon. There would be times where she would kind of go in and out, but most of the time she would be around.
You got a chance to observe Rhonda Jewell caring for your daughter, correct?
Yes, sir.
And how would you describe that care?
Very attentive. She would always be one-on-one with her. Sometimes they would sit on the floor and play with toys, or she took care of her, treated her like her own.
Were there times that Ms. Jewell took your daughter out of the salon or kept her somewhere else?
She would normally not keep her anywhere else, but she would take her out, and they would run errands or do whatever.
Did you ever have any concerns about the care your daughter was receiving from Rhonda Jewell?
No, sir.
You ever have any incidents where you were concerned that your child had been injured or harmed in any way?
No, sir.
She stopped watching your youngest daughter approximately when? Do you remember?
It was about 1.5 years. She watched her when she started school.
Since that time, has Rhonda Jewell watched or babysat any of your children?
There's been times where she's maybe taken her for the day, or there was a time where I was kind of in a bind and I needed her to pick her up from school, and she picked her up for me, things like that.
Same questions earlier. Any concerns about any of that at all?
No, sir.
Always provided good care.
Always.
Are you aware of Rhonda Jewell's reputation in the community for providing quality child care?
Objection, Your Honor.
It's a proffer, Judge.
Basis?
And there's a lack of foundation. He's going into reputation evidence in the
Well,
community.
he can, I think he can, overruled at this point. Next question may turn things around, but
Do you have any knowledge of Rhonda Jewell's reputation in the community for providing high-quality child care?
Yes.
And what is that?
She was always good. I would recommend her to anybody.
okay, that's it. Okay, next question.
Judge, just a moment.
Yes.
I have no questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Ma'am, it'd be fair to say you don't know anything about this case.
I have never talked to her about this case, no, sir.
And you don't know Brooke Page or Justice Page.
No, sir.
Okay. So you weren't there the day that this incident occurred? You weren't a witness to what occurred at that house? Nothing?
Nothing.
Thank you.
Any other questions of this witness?
No, sir.
Okay, ma'am, you can step down. You are excused, but subject to recall. That means they may call you back again. So. Okay, counsel, approach the bench, please. Housekeeping. We're going to take our noon recess at this time. We will come back and be ready to go at 1 o'clock. So we are in recess until 1.